Hey, great. So I start off by saying straight away that I did a pretty dangerous thing, which is yesterday I changed my presentation because Fabian said, hey, make it a bit more TED Talk-like. So it's a pretty new set of slides, and I see if I can pull down a nice storyline from those slides. And I think I will start just saying a few things about myself. So I have been working in the field of AI for a very long time, 25 years, started off doing my master's and PhD. In the field of AI, I started off doing my psychology degree because I found it terribly helpful to understand human behavior and animal behavior. So how do animals and humans make decisions under which type of context? And took it all the way through becoming an adjunct associate professor in Australia. But at the same time, another big thing that I did is, of course, having my career in big companies in the world. So I was at IBM, for example, at the British Telecom, Hewlett-Packard, large, big organization. Now I'm the vice president and global head of AI at Tieto. So I've been doing hundreds of these types of AI projects, very passionate about it. And then finally, I'm also an entrepreneur. And I guess there, for example, with Fabian and I have a good bit of overlap here, and also VC funds and so on, looking at the next big thing in the entrepreneurial and startup world, which I find terribly fascinating, because usually all the innovation and this risk-taking happens in that sort of space. So that's a little bit my background, and I'm, of course, extremely excited that AI has become such a big topic in the world. Looking back, it has been quite a nerdy topic, so I mean, some of you can probably confirm that it's probably in the last few years has become a forum for those that were the absolute nerds back in the days, right? And in fact, now it has switched from being a topic which only a few people talked about and knew about to almost everyone talking about it. Also those that are not necessarily qualified. In fact, there are many that use it now a little bit, not only a little bit, but a fair bit as a marketing type of hype, right? So startups certainly attract a lot more funding, and companies saying they know what to do, although I'm speaking to a lot of CEOs and also ministers, and it becomes very apparent that knowledge is not truly penetrated in the mind of those people, which I think is a bit sad, but okay. Just to think what has happened so far, so just asking the people in the audience to get a sense of what has happened in the past and what children today, millennials, have no experience with. So how many of you have listened to music tapes, like literal tapes that you put in a tape recorder and so on? So very many, right? So that sort of technology is obsolete, and you see probably on YouTube a fair few people and a fair few kids, you give them that tape and they have absolutely no clue what to do with it, right? How many of you have used a fixed telephone line to actually call up people and arrange things in your life? So very many. What does that say about the age average here in the room? But, but look, there's, again, yeah. But you find very entertaining YouTube videos, and you get 18-year-old kids, these old telephones, they have absolutely no clue how to use it. Yeah, and so that's just giving a bit of a sense, and those types of technologies are completely foreign to the kids in the generation today. And when you look into the future, what type of things are we used to today, which kids won't be, in the future, our kids won't be exposed to? And one example is, so how many of you have actually kids younger than 5 years old? So about 20, 30, 40%, whoops. Destroyed. So those kids are most likely, they won't be learning how to drive a car. They don't need to. So in 10, 15 years' time, there's very, very highly likely going to be cars that will be self-driving. Those types of technologies are never meant to be on the road like next year or the year after. They take a little bit of while to come through. So they will also be these kids will be living in a hyper-personalized world. So everything they will be receiving will be very tailored to them. So it will be, for example, articles which are not generically written in, for example, the Zeit or in other newspapers in Germany or in New York Times. But it's very likely that not only the channel at which you get presented this type of information, but also the content itself is actually going to be highly individualized to your needs and who you are. Not necessarily the message, the content of the message, but how it's written. Another example is, precision medicine. So what I'm seeing now, and I'm also at the Karolinska Institute, which is one of the big medical universities in Stockholm, which gives out the Nobel Prize in medicine. And what I'm seeing now is that there are already AI technology used in the healthcare field. So for example, some of you are aware of MRIs and those types of pilots. so MRIs and X-rays, where you start seeing abnormalities in the scans. And my prediction is that in about 5 years, we see some of those technologies being in place. In 20 years, it will be commonplace. And in 40 years, our kids will look back and our grandkids will be looking back to this day today and think, how did these people do that? So how could a GP possibly make sense of this enormous data that you're representing as a person? So that's just, when we look back to 200 years ago and how, in the Middle Age, medicine was delivered, right? The kids and our grandkids in 40 years will look back to our time today and see, well, how could a GP have possibly made sense of all this genetic data, all the information that the individuals have in terms of their historic medical history, and how could they have compared that to lots of other types of patients who have sort of the same type of background, right? Very complex. And there are, in fact, quite a few examples, and I will mention that in a minute, of people that have similar conviction. So, and the other thing is, and I think that's sort of the main message of the talk in some sense, they will also be interacting much more with AIs. So there will be these human mixed AI teams, and the technology that you're using and the way you interact with it will be much more important. So there will be chatbots and virtual assistants. There's already plenty of cases in China where people are starting to form a very close bond to some of these chatbots and virtual assistants, the way they are talking with each other. And there's actually plenty of evidence, now I can't remember the name, but of a chatbot that people actually fell in love with because, they had interactions which were meaningful enough for them. So I'm not suggesting we're at a point, where these AIs are all sufficiently smart to make these types of relationships happening, but we're actually getting there. And I think there will be more and more of that. And there's, in fact, examples in the healthcare space in Sweden where you use these chatbots for kids that start being depressed. And they actually prefer these chatbots over human beings because they feel less judged. So when you're depressed or have a mental issue, you're most likely or less likely to go to another human being and explaining and sharing what type of your types of problems and mental issues. So talking to a chatbot that gives you sort of neutral advice is a much easier way to interact with a machine and get this type of advice. So, and then I'm seeing the time is going, so my storytelling seems to be working. But here on this slide, I think what's very important, which I'm missing here and on the many other events, is to have a grounded discussion of what AI actually is. And I think a lot of people are still not completely clear. There are some excellent books which are usually learned when you start to study AI, such as Russell and Nordic, Artificial Intelligence, a Modern Approach. And the point that I want to make here or several points, is that AI has been around for a very long time. So it's not just the buzz for the last two or 3 years. AI has started in probably around 1950, where Alan Turing wrote a book called Can Machines Think, and started to introduce the Turing test. So many of you are probably familiar with the Turing test, which is a test of seeing whether an AI has reached human level sort of performance in its intelligence. And so that's one. And then, of course, a few years later, John McCarthy and a group of researchers, pretty nerdy researchers, right, Marvin Minsky and a number of others, started this whole field of AI, which today has about 25 subfields. So just like in medicine, we have about 20, 30 different subfields like dermatology, immunology, and many others. In artificial intelligence, you have a very similar setup. So people in this workshop back about 70 years ago started to define these different areas. Is that a laser? It won't work. Okay, but you see essentially these different areas that are in red are considered to be subfields in artificial intelligence, and they are well established. There have been hundreds of thousands of papers published in this field over the last decades, and there are many researchers and many faculties that dedicate themselves to this type of topic. So, and then of course there's a question that comes up. Some people insist wanting to have a definition of AI, and then I'm taking a step back and thinking often, well, why do you need the definition of AI? What for exactly, right? And so I think that is a very important question you need to ask yourself. In the medical sector, that there is an answer to that. So if you, for example, want to become a practicing practitioner, so GP, a doctor, a physician, there is a clear definition because you can't not just anyone can become a doctor. You have to go through training, you have to be registered, and you have to be monitored. It's a pretty rigorous field, and I'm actually expecting something very similar thing happening in AI and data science also, because we are essentially dealing with people's life. right? It's people's life, people's finances, people's human rights. And not everyone should be tinkering with this type of technology, right? There should be very specific registrations. At the same time, I'm warning against making it too overcomplicated, which Europeans tend to do. They make it very complicated, and they look at Brussels, and they look at Berlin, and what type of regulation can we put up? And I was in Brussels recently, and I came to the conclusion that, well, let's try to have as little regulation as possible as needed. So I'm not saying don't have any and just go out wildly, but organize that properly, right? So that is something to consider. Quickly, this is just a reminder. Fabian hinted to it, and I think we go a little bit deeper into this big thing. Why is suddenly everyone waking up to this? Why is AI in everyone's mouth? And one of the reasons is the economic growth. So it's responsible for the majority of growth of the GDP globally. And then Gartner and many others have analyzed and suggested that it's the most disruptive class of technologies by far for the next 10, 20 years coming. So then other technologies come, but AI, machine learning is number one. I've named like 3 countries that really leaned into this. The USA many years ago under Obama developed a really nice, thorough assessment of what AI can do as a multi-purpose technology, which it is, so it will be applied across every single industry. And they wrote a very good report, which is about 150 pages long. I recommend you to read it. It's still very relevant. So they leaned into this. It hasn't been picked up quite with the current government. Another one to note is, of course, Finland, I think. So they have been a few years ago being the first to introduce a strategy for Finland in terms of AI. And so that was very forward-leaning. And I happen to live in Stockholm, and I'm in Finland almost every week. So I have a lot of interactions with the ministers there and with the prime minister, as well as in Sweden and in Oslo. And Finland is very far forward-looking. And so I also feel, well, why is it that Finland is doing it? Well, it's in part because they are looking for new opportunities after some of those big companies not being as strong as they once were, like Nokia and so on. But also they hang, I just say that on a private note, it's my observation, but they hang a bit their ego outside the door when you go into the negotiation room. So the prime minister, the CEO, I find them very grounded in the discussion. And so that is actually a very important prerequisite in order to make like very, very strong-headed and good forward-looking decisions. So the other one is, of course, jobs. Big, huge topic. The WEF, the World Economic Forum, has estimated that in the next 3 years there will be 75 million jobs being lost and 133 new ones. These types of estimates are really difficult to make because, no one really knows what AI and how AI influences things, but it's sort of a ballpark figure. So it is a net increase of jobs at 58 million types of, 58 million jobs. Then at the same time, I actually try to distinguish a little bit more. What I'm often saying is AI does not kill jobs, it kills tasks. Right? So because AI is very good in solving certain specific tasks that require certain cognitive abilities. So I think there is plenty more to do in the future. Then the other fact, and we had plenty of discussions in the breaks, I had at least quite a few on that topic, which is the experts. So Wired and the New York Times have estimated that there are less than 10,000 people, AI experts in the world, that can truly move the needle. That really understand the business, the technology, the science, and also have a good grasp on what it means for society. And in Sweden, if you statistically map it to Sweden, that's about 5, and in Finland it's about 3. So I haven't done the mapping for Germany, but I don't think it's about maybe 2025 or something. And so the other point to make here is we are netto exporters in Europe altogether of talent in the AI space. So far more people that we're educating here go to the US and China now too, than remain in Europe and see that they have a chance to actually develop their skills, which is a big worry. We have to turn that around. Good. If it isn't clear, I think I will go over this slide reasonably quickly, but what I'm seeing when I'm sometimes discussing this topic, particularly in the healthcare space, and the audience is full of physicians and CEOs of big hospitals, right? So, if you're believing so one thing to think about is when you develop products and services today, anything, I mean, even if it is a loaf of bread, it requires many of those technologies which have been groundbreaking over the last 100 years. So there's almost nothing that you can develop today competitively without the help of electricities or computers. I mean, the whole value chain and supply chain are relying on those types of technology. And it's very similar with artificial intelligence. So it's creeping in. And I'm always also saying, so I'm not a blind advocate of AI. I'm always saying, well, if you have a business problem to solve, if you can, try to solve it without AI and machine learning. And the reason I say that is it's very, very complex. And there are not enough people dealing with that properly at the moment. So if you can, try to avoid it. But I think the reality is it's about the same type of message that I would say in 1998, well, try to avoid using the internet as much as you can. It will be an overwhelming wave of technologies that will be provided and delivered through AI sort of technology and science. So you can't be avoiding that. All right, wow, 4 minutes, and I actually wanted to start talking about the connection. So what brought me into the field of AI? And I think one of the main reasons why we are intelligent, and that certainly has motivated me, and I studied psychology and social psychology and cognitive psychology, is that one reason we have intelligence is that we effectively can communicate with each other and connect with each other. So that is one of those big things that I'm a strong believer in, and that drove in part my psychology thesis. So when I did my psychology thesis, I was focusing a lot on building trust between a human and an AI. So I built chatbots, and that was a long time ago, which were, in the way it speaks to individuals, would increase the trust in those individuals, in these humans. It was sort of a real estate scenario, and the way it would do it, it would explain the decisions it takes in the process of this dialogue. And so you could clearly see in our experimental groups that those that received that type of information, certain extroverts like these types of explanations. So we measured whether or not they're extrovert and introverts, and those that receive more information actually took it as a positive effect. Those that are introverts were not so positively affected. But when you map that to today, so I see this red line, like every industry and every company is now extremely interested in building this trust, with the users. So particularly when you have chatbots, and they are starting to look at many factors. So when you build a chatbot, some of you might think, oh, well, that's sort of solved. You go to some website today, some bank, and you have some chats. Well, we haven't even started that journey. I mean, in part, you have things that you don't see, like things like intention recognition. So what you type in may not necessarily be what you mean, right? So there's lots of AI software that starts detecting what you actually mean. It's called intent recognition. Another important thing that is not completely cracked, and particularly in Europe with all these different languages, is the languages. So when you're using sentiment analysis, so were you after a chat happier or angrier as a resolution of the questions that you had to, let's say, to the bank? And then there's many other things, like you can use biometric identification. So are you actually the person that you say you are? By the way you type in things. Just by the way you type in things, you can detect a lot. Coursera and EDX using this technology to identify students, for example, when you log on. So these are very important things. Then you have multimodal interactions. So when you start using and seeing people, intonations, when you start talking to the bot and it recognizes whether you're stressed or unhappy. End-turn conversations is a huge topic, whereby now most of us using these technologies just to say and give a command and say, well, turn off the light or something. But maintaining a dialogue over many so-called dialogue turns, takes a completely different technology, so not many chatbots are able to do that. The other one is I did my master thesis a long time ago, and again, that draws me all the way to today's technologies, and I've reapplied all my thoughts and my learnings from those days to what I'm doing now in all these companies. But I was doing my master thesis on robotic soccer playing. So at the time, we had these robotic soccer dogs, eyeballs, and they were playing completely autonomously against another league. So literally, they had a picture about the world, a model about the world. They understood where other team members are, right? And they're played as a team against another team. And this is one of those grand challenges which is posed to many AI researchers to achieve, just like it was for chess playing in 1998 with Kasparov, and also with the AlphaGo Zero. These are all games which, when you achieve them, it's considered to be a big milestone. So this is one of those types of games that when they are achieved, they are considered to be extremely useful for applications like search and rescue, or in hospital setting where a robot needs to, for example, lift a patient from one bed to another, needs to collaborate with the different nurses and doctors in the hospital, for example. And then, of course, you see many of these retail shops. We built, for example, a system that goes through supermarket aisles and detects what's in the shelves, and so it would automatically sort of reshelf them, but at the same time also be available and offer information to the visitors to this shop, right? Okay, and then another one, and that was a lot of that stems originally from the PhD thesis, whereby I looked at, can you build autonomous systems and teams that would make decisions together? And I was investigating under what conditions would these teams make optimal decisions. So how would they be exchanging information with each other and aggregating information in the most effective way, so that they, number one, wouldn't need to exchange and talk so much with each other, but still have enough knowledge about the world in order to understand it properly. And so that's actually something that we started to use in the healthcare sector. So when you have sort of care teams that need to make decisions with each other and so on. So I think I have, here we go. So I think I have 2 more slides to go. And one is, well, AI transforms value chains and work. And I think one way to start looking at it is you have, let's see, yes. So the way how I look at the tasks that are essentially that need to be done in order to create value and deliver these products and services that I mentioned earlier, there are essentially 3 types of tasks which will be influenced. One is humans and employees will be augmented in the way they're delivering their share to their job, to the company, right? And so augmentation would mean that as a radiologist or pathologist, you would be, you have all this data, all these MRIs and X-rays coming in. You see certain patterns in these X-rays, but an AI is much better at doing that sort of part and, going and crunching all that data. Together, you will be much better able to make these types of decisions. And that's actually now well established also in the scientific literature, that AIs are much better at pattern recognition, but when you start throwing the knowledge and the wisdom of those, let's say, the biological systems and the artificial systems together, you receive significantly better outcomes. The other one is, of course, automation. And now maybe in the background you saw maybe this type of video. I find this particularly interesting because it shows how a robot goes over fields and essentially sprays some weed killer on like wheat in the field, right? And it does it, it's solar panel, it's a solar powered, and it goes back and forth, and it has a deep learning algorithm in the front, and it detects what's good plants and what are bad plants, and it sprays them. And in my world, that's a very good idea of replacing these types of tasks, because I don't know many people that want to build a career out of weed plucking, right? So that's something where I think I see some very good use here. And then, of course, there are plenty of new tasks. So I mentioned earlier, within the industry, like when you have chatbots or other AIs, you want to build AIs that have certain personalities. So many banks and many insurance companies, the very important relationship that you have with the customer, it is very important, and you want that chatbot to represent the values of the company. So you need to employ people that have the ability to put this personality into these types of chatbots and personalities. So there are plenty of other new tasks and jobs that are coming. So last slide, I think the message and what I wanted to say is that the companies that will succeed and the industry and the research that needs to focus now on very important topics, or in my opinion, one of the most important topics is that trust and the collaboration with AI. So trust in AI. When you have that in your company and takes over certain tasks, then you need to build among employees a trust that that system is doing what it is meant to do, what everyone says it would do. And that's not an easy task. It's a very difficult task, in fact. Then the collaboration with the AI, so you need to make this connection and the interaction, the communication between the AIs and the human being smooth. And I'm not talking about robots or very sophisticated chatbots, but also when you use predictive analytics and traffic control and so on, because the system starts doing things that you didn't expect it to do. And then also the thinking, there's often this thinking, and that will be my last 2-3 sentences, that, you know, there's this one AI, right? We built this one AI system, and it will be sitting there, and it's doing all the analysis, and then it gives us this very nice prediction about where the market is going. Well, no, there will be very many AIs, and many will have a so-called agency. They will have an understanding, you know, about what's going on in the company, and they need to align their goals and the way they are acting with all these other AIs that are in the system, as well as the humans. And that's actually a complete research area in its own right, which has been around for 35 years. So now many of these systems have become very, very sophisticated, and they are applied now in a number of companies. And I think those companies that take that to heart will be having a very nice leap forward in this new industry, in this new era of artificial intelligence. Thank you. Nice.
Okay. So, thank you very much. That was good. We have 5 minutes left for Q&A. Who has a question and would like to ask Christian a question? You? Here you go.
Hi, Heikki Rioska from TU Dresden. Just a very quick one. So, from my experience with a human way of behavior and human cognition, I would say that like the opposite is going to be the problem. Right now, maybe people don't trust AIs, but we have observed that when the computer systems have been introduced in the workplaces and workflows, then people won't do things because the computer doesn't allow them to do it anymore. So they kind of overtrust the computer against perhaps their own better judgment. And don't you see that this is going to be a possibility with the AI as well? Once the AI has been shown to outperform humans in many tasks, then, for example, the radiologist is going to look at the thing and say, oh, AI says that, and the AI has been shown to be better than me, so why would I just not trust the AI?
So you mean why, so just to understand, you mean why the AI system, or why you would trust the system automatically, or?
No, I'm just, right now you said that the problem is...
Yeah.
That the problem is that people don't trust the AI.
Yeah.
And I think that is, right now, that is the problem. But I would say that...
you mean they're trusting it too much? They would just leave...
In about 5 years' time, say, in some fields, the AI is going to be shown to be so good that the humans will actually trust the AI more than they trust themselves. And this is what I think might happen, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and in some cases that's exactly right. So, well, yes, and so we already trust lots of technologies to a good extent, and if it's very reliable and it keeps, you know, it does deliver the outcomes that you expect it to deliver, and it gives you the benefits and the value and the positive things that it should give you, then, you know, I don't see it as a problem. And you're correct that, you know, once we reach that stage where you see these, you know, tasks and AIs doing jobs which you naturally can see, you know, offering that benefit, then that would be a good thing. But at the moment, just to reiterate the point I made earlier, at the moment I see that the main parts in the workflows and the value chains, there is a fair bit to do, not on the algorithmic side, you know, not for the AI and the technology to do, to improve, but it's more like, well, if you bring it in and you have a sales executive that is, you know, looking at leads and needs to call up people to sell things, for example, and you have this AI software that says, well, these are the 5 leads you should call up now, and your commission by the end of the year, you know, depends on whom you're calling up and where you spend your time, then you need to have sort of this natural connection to this type of, you know, technology and these types of outcomes. But overall, I see this as a much bigger problem at the moment than the other way around.
Yeah, right now. I agree.
Yeah.
But also, going back to the, sorry, I'll just speak loudly so I if we are having certifications for who can do the AI stuff, so to speak, then the average users of the AI, for example, doctors and whatnot, they are probably not going to have those certifications. So I can see a little bit of a technocratic problem here. And it's not a problem per se. I believe in AI, and I don't think that's a problem. But I think it might be bring a problem in the political sense. Some kind of political backlash when people start trusting the AIs too much. But it's just the science fiction that we might not get.
I mean, shall we maybe, we can take this afterwards. No, it's a bigger question, right? But I think that, but that's where it's naturally going. There's another, maybe quick response to just demonstrate where it's maybe not even our choice of trusting an AI might go away. Amazon a few years ago has actually lodged a patent which would predict what you want to buy. So the entire industry, Amazon is essentially based on, giving you recommendations. It's a core part of their business model. When you go to Amazon, you get recommendations, and there's thousands of top machine learning guys that are trying to optimize, these recommendations so that you essentially buy 4 out of 10 recommendations, and then 3 out of 10 recommendations becomes better and better. And when it switches to a point where it's viable to send out, let's say, and this is, by the way, called the shop and then buy model. And they start thinking about turning it around and making it a shop and then ship model, meaning that they predict who you are. They send you the item without you actually knowing what you might want. It arrives at your doorstep. You think, well, what is that? And then and that would be based on them being confident that that prediction would actually be correct. Right? And so there's plenty of implications. One of it is, first of all, it takes away your choice in some sense. You get these types of things. And the second part is that those companies that apply these types of technologies will wipe out the entire competition. Because you essentially, if the others are still, we're expecting all these customers to go to on our website and shop and spend a lot of time, well, by that time, Amazon and another company will have already sent these types of items, right? So there's plenty of those types of things. So I see more these macro type impacts and individuals, because they will see the benefits like with many other technologies.